Alright, now that we've basted our canvas into our wool, we're going to get it ready to be pad stitched. So there's a few things we need to do. The first thing we need to do is transfer the roll line onto the canvas. So take your pattern and line up the edges of your pattern with your wool. Um, you may not be able to line up the whole pattern. As you can see here, I have a dart in the line, so I can't line up, but that's okay because I really am just more concerned about the area around the lapel where the roll line is. Okay. Now I'm gonna, once I had it lined up, I'm just gonna go ahead and pin my pattern onto my garment here, my jacket front. And I'm gonna start at this outer edge. I'm gonna make sure everything's laying flat. So if your pattern's really wrinkled or anything, please press it first carefully. And again, just pin around the edges here, and I'll work my way in towards the center and the roll line, because again, that's what I'm trying to transfer onto my canvas. And again, I'm working with a 3D garment now and a flat pattern, so just go slow and make sure it's lining up very well. You should have notches on your garment, and the notches on your garment should hopefully line up with the notches on your pattern, since that's where you come from. And that can also be a guide to help lining up your pattern with your front of your jacket. Okay, so again, I don't need to pin on the whole pattern, just the area, a big chunk of it, and wherever the roll line passes through. So now how am I going to transfer that? What I'm going to do is I'm going to take pins and I'm going to put them right through the roll line. Okay, so you should have your roll line marked on your pattern, and I'm just putting these pins right through my roll line, and they're going through all layers. So they're going through my pattern, my wool, and my canvas. And then this way, on the other side, on the canvas, I'll be able to mark where my pins are. Okay, so I'm going to pin them through my whole row line, every half inch to an inch, and this way I'll be able to transfer them to the canvas. Okay, now once my roll line's been pinned, I'm going to flip it over, and you can see my pins, all right, that I've put through my roll line. I'm going to take my color pencil, and I'm going to mark right underneath the pin, okay, not on the side of it. I'm going to mark just a line, a nice straight line with the pin, using the pin as a guide. I'm going to mark it right underneath the pin, okay, because that's where my roll line is. And then these lines I'll eventually connect together with a ruler. So just go over every pin and mark it with your colored pencil. Okay, once you've finished marking them, you can go ahead and take all your pins out of your pattern and of your roll line and remove the pattern from your garment. Okay, so my pattern's been removed, and I have those green markings. So I'm going to take my ruler, and I'm just going to use those markings. I'm going to line it up on those markings, and now I can draw in my roll line. Okay, once my roll line has been drawn in, I'm going to baste through all layers. I'm going to baste right on my roll line. Okay, so I actually doubled up my thread here so I could see it well. And I'm just going to do a running uneven basting stitch through my roll line. Alright, so I'm starting at the bottom and I'm going to go through the whole garment until I get to the neckline where the roll line ends. Okay, so now I finished basting my roll line. I'll turn this around and you can see the other side very clearly. There's my roll line. Okay, make sure that when you basted you didn't shrink your garment at all or gather it up. Again, it's just the mark through all layers or on both sides the roll line of your lapel. So now what we need to do is catch stitch our canvas to our wool, and we're going to do this at the shoulder seam and at the underarm seam where there's canvas. So what we want to do is we're going to mark out our seam allowance. Okay, so I'm going to move a few pins out of the way and I'm going to mark. Okay, I have 1/2 inch seam allowance, so I'm going to mark a 1/2 inch down from there. But before I do that, I'm going to trim away any hair canvas that is showing that is longer than my wool. So be careful not to trim your wool. Only trim away any hair canvas because it makes it hard to measure down from the cut edge of the wool if the hair canvas is longer. Okay, so we want this to be accurate for when we cut away the seam allowance at the shoulder seam and at the under the armhole. Okay, so this is a good time to go ahead and just trim away any canvas around that's longer. Okay, and just make it so it's even with the wool. Okay, so now I've trimmed away the canvas even with the wool. I'm going to mark my seam allowance at my shoulder seam. I have a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so I'm measuring a 1/2 inch away from the cut edge, and I'm marking that with a line. And I'm going to do the same at the side seam just under my armhole where I have canvas. Okay. So again, 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to trim away. I'm marking a 1/2 inch away from the cut edge of the wool. And now I can trim away that 1/2 inch. So be very careful here to only trim away the canvas. You are not trimming away the wool. Okay? So if you trim away your wool, you're going to have to cut a whole new piece and start all over again and reapply the canvas. So you do not want to go and do all that work again. So please be careful and just trim away the canvas. All right? All right, so now that we've trimmed away our canvas, we're going to catch stitch our canvas to our wool, and we're going to do it right in that seam allowance. Make sure that you use that your thread matches your wool now. um, it will blend in better. And right now, when you're catch stitching it to a wool, or whenever we do any of the handwork here, where we're catching something to the wool, we just want to grab a few threads of the wool, okay, just like one or two. You want to be very careful, um, because we don't want to have a bunch of puckers. The thinner your fabric is, the easier things are going to show through. I'm using a thicker wool here, so it makes it a little easier to hide these stitches. In fact, I might get a few puckers, but once I press it, you can't even tell. Okay, so again, it's important to use thread that matches your wool, and what you're doing is you're catching the canvas, and then you're just catching a little bit of the wool. Okay, so you'll do this at your shoulder seams and at your side seam. Okay, now that we're done catch stitching our canvas to the shoulder and side seam, we have one more thing we need to do here, and we're going to stay stitch our armhole, and we're going to do that at the machine. So 1/2 inch seam allowance, and this is just a stay stitch, so we're not back tacking at the beginning or end, and just stay stitch your armhole at a 1/2 inch.